Remember back with me, where were you on February 1st, the year 2003? That one too tough for you? You don't remember? Let's try this. Where were you when the news of the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster broke? Hmm. Some of you are going to remember that. You know, the second greatest tragedy in the NASA space program was the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster, where the shuttle broke up upon re-entry, killing all 7 of those brave crew members. You probably remember that. Here with us today is a woman who remembers the details of that day with painful accuracy. My guest is Evelyn Husband Thompson. Her husband, Rick Husband, was one of the good men who died on that day. Welcome to Grounded, Evelyn.
Good morning. Thank you.
Hey, tell us about Rick.
He was a great guy. We met in college, even though we grew up in the same hometown of Amarillo, Texas. We went to the same high school, but he was a year ahead of me in school, but we didn't meet till college. Dated all through college. On our very first date, I asked him what he wanted to do in life, and he said, I want to be an astronaut. Nobody had ever said that to me before. But it was really interesting, and he was serious. He'd pursued this since he was little. And so we dated all through college and married after he finished pilot training.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. Yeah, you don't get that on every date. I want to be an astronaut. Well, on January 16th, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia took off from the Kennedy Space Center, and a piece of the insulation damaged the wing when it was taking off. Did you know on that day that the crew was going to have trouble on re-entry, Evelyn?
Absolutely not. Nobody knew. Nobody had any idea.
So just 3 days before your husband was scheduled to land on January 28th, you observed 3 really special anniversaries. What were those 3 things that happened on January 28th?
So that day started really early for me. I got my kids up before dawn, which was taboo in this house. But we drove to Johnson Space Center to have a video chat with Rick on the space shuttle. So this was our second one. And it was a very significant day because it was an anniversary of Rick's and my first date. So we had our first date back in 1977 in college. And so this was the anniversary of that, and we'd always remembered that. And so his very first words to me that early morning were happy dating anniversary. Oh. We also knew the anniversary of the Challenger accident, which had happened in 1986. And so we were very mindful of that. And Rick went on later that day to commemorate and remember and honor the Challenger crew. And it was just a very significant day. It was the last day we actually ever spoke. Dana, we had no idea that that was going to be the case. It was the last time I ever heard his voice, and the words he spoke were, I love you, and those were my words to him.
Oh, precious. Well, where were you that day, just a few days later, when the news broke that the shuttle had, in fact, exploded?
So the night before, my children, Laura and Matthew, Laura was 12, Matthew was 7. We traveled to Florida with the rest of the Columbia families, and we're extremely excited to see our family members the next day, welcome them that morning on February 1st, and we all stood on the runway at Kennedy Space Center anticipating their return. We could hear the audio while we were waiting of the crew interfacing with mission control. And so we were not alarmed. There were no concerns. And there was an expected silence period as they were re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. So again, there was no concern. The concern only began when they could not reconnect with the crew at the designated time.
And what went through your heart, your mind, when you realized what had happened?
It's very difficult. It was extremely shocking. Obviously trauma. So everything was surreal, and it seemed to go in slow motion. My huge concern were for my children. We really didn't have answers at that point. Most of the world was already seeing video on the TV of the streaks of the vehicle broken apart going across the Texas sky in East Texas. We had not seen that. And so we were waiting for information. And so my first instinct was just to be with my children and take care of them and to find out the truth, to find out what was going on.
Yeah. You know, your husband was a good man, and he did a brave thing. Every astronaut that ever went up into space knew they were risking their lives for the advancement of society. And I wonder, you've had time many years now to think, what do you think Rick would have said about what happened that day? What do you think he would have said to us?
Well, he knew it was a calculated risk, and our lives are all filled with that. It's a calculated risk to get out of bed in the morning, but we feel like it's worth it. And so he felt like this was something of great value. He wanted more than anything for people to know about Jesus, so much so that on his contingency sheet that he wrote out just in case something happened, to tell them about Jesus, that Jesus is real to him. So I think that more than anything, that's the legacy that Rick wanted to leave, not only with me and Laura and Matthew, but the world. And I've done my best to honor that. But it was more than anything, it was crucial to him that Laura and Matthew had a relationship with Jesus, so much so he made videotapes for each one that they listened to every morning while he was in space. And he recorded those in the midst of 1,000 million other things he had to do. It was very, very much a priority to him. And so each morning, Laura watched her tape and Matthew watched his. And it was about 5 minutes long. And he would read from their devotional books like he did here at home, and pray with them, read the Bible verse and a little story, and then just talk to them and say a prayer with them, just like he did at home. But that was very important to him. And because of that, though he died at an early age, within my children's lives, he's left a legacy.
How beautiful. That's what good men do. They leave a legacy. And you know what you're saying? It's these good men. You know, we know him as an astronaut who flew up into space, but it is what we are in private really proves who we are. And it's far more than we ever are in public. And you're saying that in the middle of getting ready to travel to space, he knew that planting the truth of God's word and the love of Jesus Christ into his children was so important that he took time to make those videos for his children. Now that right there, to me, is the example of a good man. Evelyn, I think sometimes today women are not supporting their good, godly men in the way that God wants us to. That's because we have so much stress and other pressures on us and other ideologies and thinking pressing upon us. So what tip do you have for us as wives, mothers, brothers of good men? How do you think we can honor and support men like your husband, Rick?
I feel like it's really important to understand that the enemy's strategy is to confuse and distract. And so all of us are bombarded with information every single day, with way more tasks than we can possibly accomplish in a day. And so even though we're good women and they're good men, we live distracted. And so one of the most powerful things we can do is to be still and to pray. And one of the most powerful things I feel that I have done to support Rick throughout his career was to pray for him. He knew I was praying for him each step of the way. We prayed together every single day. We prayed over our children and we prayed for each other. And I don't think there's anything more powerful than that, to be still before the Lord.
Yeah. And, you know, I want to say that if you're married to a man whose character is like Rick's husband, pray. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, but that's not the man I'm married to, and that's not the son that I had hoped to raise, he's a prodigal right now, all the more important that you do the very same thing. Pray that God would speak to their hearts and bring them to a place of goodness in their lives, goodness according to his word. Evelyn, you know, I'm also thinking about widows who are grieving their good men, missing them. I sat with one just this weekend who was at the graduation party of her granddaughter, and she just lost her husband this past year. Said, "How are you today?" She said, "I miss him so much." God does go on to heal. He does go on to bring good men into your lives, sometimes even as husbands. Tell us about the man you call the second love of your life.
So Bill Thompson is an amazing man. We knew each other from church. I knew his grown children from church. His son was actually my daughter's teacher when Rick died. Bill and I didn't know each
Mm,
other that well, but I have so much respect and love for him. We married almost 15 years ago,
yeah,
and we have learned so much together. And again, I asked Bill even the question preparing for this interview about how do I best encourage him, and he said the very same thing I just shared with you, is praying for him and giving him undivided attention when we have conversations are two of the most powerful things that I can possibly do. And when you mentioned the prodigals and all of that, I just think it's so important as women to absolutely love and honor these men. But most of all, our priority needs to be our relationship with God. God is perfect, men are not. And when we
yeah.
have our eyes on Jesus, everything else falls into place.
That is a good word of wisdom to end on. Thank you, Evelyn Husband, for being Evelyn Husband Thompson. I'm going to get that right. For being with us here today. You are a blessing and an encouragement to so many of us.
Thank you.
You can get all the details of Evelyn's story by getting a copy of her book, High Calling. The subtitle is The Courageous Life and Faith of Space Shuttle Colombia Commander Rick Husband. It's co-written by a mutual friend of mine and Evelyn's, Donna Van Leer.